Hi, I'm Femi. Okay, you're watching the stream. Yemen is in the midst of a 5-year civil war. Millions of people in Yemen need aid and protection. But are they getting it? The answer is obviously no. As we delve into the conversation about what is happening in Yemen, I want you to see a report by my colleagues at Jazeera.com. It gives you a really good idea of what is happening down on the ground. Some of the things you're about to see, some of these images are very upsetting. Let's have a look. So the question we're asking today is, has the world abandoned Yemen? If you are in YouTube right now, jump into the chat, let us know your thoughts, and you too can be part of this conversation. We have one guest who is in Yemen. We have one guest who is outside of Yemen. And do bear with us because it is not easy to get a connection to Sana'a in Yemen during a civil war. So I am very pleased to say that Ahmed, you are joining us on the phone. Tell everybody who you are. Introduce yourself to our global audience.
Yes, hello everyone. This is Ahmed Baider from Yemen. I am a journalist producer who I work in the field inside the country. I work with TV crews and we try our best to send the story and the reality in my country.
Ahmed, it's really good to have you. And Afrah, welcome back to the stream. Remind everybody who you are.
So my name is Afrah Nasser. I am from Sana'a. I am based in Sweden and I work as the Yemen researcher with Human Rights Watch organization. And I document human rights abuses and international humanitarian law violations in Yemen.
Afra, I want to put this tweet and run this tweet by you. It's from Fatima, who is a Yemeni American, and she is based in Washington, D.C. She says, every time I attend an event on Yemen, I hear the ABC of conflict and historical context over and over again. Can we pick it up a bit? Where are things going? What can we do to achieve peace? Can we solve the humanitarian crisis without addressing human rights violations? You can feel the frustration coming off that tweet. Afra, where are we right now in Yemen?
Well, life has been extremely difficult for millions of civilians in Yemen since the beginning of the conflict. And it's true, the narrative about the conflict has really shifted along the way. And what is real for people inside the country is different from what the international or the outsider media tries to depict the situation on the ground. And that's, I think, mainly because of the problem of access. So imagine that we've been trying to speak with another speaker in the show inside Sana'a, and the telecommunication has been very difficult. So access, like, with telecommunication, and even for a lot of international journalists to go and enter the country has been extremely difficult. There is a blockade by the Saudi-led coalition against the north part of Yemen and most of the sea or the naval parts of Yemen. And there is also extremely difficult restrictions and unbelievable bureaucracy by the different parties in the south or to the east of Yemen. So access has been extremely difficult for humanitarian workers, international humanitarian organizations, and international journalists. And Yemen has been isolated for many years now in the course of the conflict. But the recent period has been, in my opinion, the most severe and difficult and unbearable period for millions of civilians in Yemen. mainly because of the outbreak of COVID pandemic,
So civil war and
which
civil
is
war and COVID. Afra, I'm really curious about how Ahmed is even covering the story. Some of that video that we showed right at the beginning of the show, Ahmed, you were involved in that. So much of the reporting that we're seeing internationally is reporting that you are
Yes.
doing down on the ground. What stories are you telling right now?
Well, as you know, now Yemen is under a war since 5 years, and we are, we have fighting, we have famine, we have everything in our country, unfortunately. And today we have a new enemy, what we call is the invisible enemy, COVID-19. So the story of Yemen, it's now we want to tell the world that COVID-19 is everywhere. That's true. But in Yemen, it's very different because COVID-19 needs a better health infrastructure. And as you know, the Yemeni health infrastructure is very fragile. We are tired, and half of the facilities and health sectors are closed and are not fully functional. So it's very, very bad. And we want to tell the world, yes, there is COVID-19 in Yemen like other countries in the world, but it's worse in Yemen because we don't have a good health infrastructure, and we don't have, you know, a peace. Actually, we are not living in peace in this country, unfortunately, and people are very tired from this war.
You mentioned COVID-19 on top of all the other challenges that you have in Yemen. I want to bring in here Jacob Burns. Jacob Burns is a regional spokesperson for Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders.
Yes.
I'm in Aden in Yemen at the moment, where Doctors Without Borders are running 2 treatment centers for COVID-19. We're seeing fewer patients in the city than we were in May and at the beginning of this month. But what's really concerning is that since the beginning of the outbreak of the virus, most of the other hospitals and health centers have closed their doors. This is a disaster in a country whose healthcare system had basically already collapsed after 5 years of war, because it means that people have even fewer options for treatment.
Jacob really wanted us to show this page here. This is Médecins Sans Frontières, their page here. Many of you, as you're watching this show, are saying, what can we do? What can we do? Jacob was taking his moment, saying, we are here. We need your help. Ahmed, you're down on the ground. What are you seeing from the various aid agencies? How are they managing? Ahmed.
Yes. MSF, MSF, they're doing a great work. In a war, it's very challenging. So it's not the aid to patients, it's also how to make a safe. So, for example, in Aden, there is a fight. Now we have an agreement that would be between the government and STC, but have much bigger, enemy is to fight COVID-19. People, it's very challenging, and
So,
people react.
Ahmed, you're breaking up a little bit. I'm just going to tell everybody that Ahmed is a reporter. He's a journalist. He's covering a lot of the stories that are coming out of Yemen. He's in Sana'a, Yemen, and he doesn't always have the best quality connection. Ahmed, we're just going to refresh that connection. I'll come right back to you. But let me show you some of this. This is the daily report of COVID cases. So in Yemen, there are 304 deaths, 432 recovered, over 1,000 cases. These are the ones that we know as of the beginning of this week. Afrah, for your work that you're doing for Human Rights Watch, how is COVID complicating that work?
Dramatically, but I think it's very important to talk about the healthcare system and how the humanitarian catastrophe is the result of years of conflict. So it's not like a natural disaster or something. So the economy is crumbling. In Yemen's infrastructure is in disaster state. Its healthcare system has almost collapsed. And this is not, like, as I told you, this is not just naturally that happened. It is the direct result of how the conflict has been conducted by the warring parties with utter disregard for international law and humanitarian norms. So the warring parties in Yemen, including the Saudi-led coalition and the Houthi armed group and the Yemeni government have, over the course of the conflict, really perpetuated a serious violation of international human rights law and international humanitarian law. And one of the more distinctive and devastating abuses of the conflict has been systematic attacks on medical infrastructure and health workers. So the warring parties have damaged or destroyed health facilities through airstrikes and shelling, and depriving Yemeni civilians of desperately needed medical services. So again, this is not a natural disaster. It is a man-made disaster, and we know who's responsible of it.
Afrah, if you were trying to explain to people who are trying to keep up with Yemen and what is happening there, where we are with the warring parties in the north, in the south of Yemen, how would you explain it to them?
Given the limited time that we have in the show, I cannot give a comprehensive idea or a comprehensive view of how the conflict for over about 6 years now. But what I can say that Yemen as a state today has fragmented, and you have a flourishing, like a flourishing view of different armed groups and militias. And every day there is new abuses committed by unknown armed groups. So the country today is mainly divided into, roughly speaking, divided into three areas. So you have in the north controlled by the Houthi armed groups. In the south, you have a mixture of the Southern Transitional Council with other groups like the Yemeni government and UAE affiliated armed groups. And then you have in the how can I say, the north to the east, you have also a mixture, or the last, I would say, the last area for the internationally recognized Yemeni government, with different political parties and different armed groups. So the country today, the fragmentation of Yemen as a state is really impacting human rights in an unprecedented way. And this is why everyone is really baffled with the situation in Yemen. The longer the conflict rages on, the more difficult it is really to find conflict resolutions that could satisfy everyone.
So in the midst of all of this, in the midst of the politics, people are caught in the middle of it. I want to show you, again, these are disturbing pictures, but I want to show you a little girl and a doctor who's trying to treat her. And again, it's so difficult for there to be some basic resources, basic healthcare in Yemen, and the healthcare system has totally collapsed. Let's see how this doctor is managing.
الطفل هذا طبعا عيسى إبراهيم ناصر جعيدي.
Issa Ibrahim Nasser Jadi is a 7-month-old child, and he weighs just 3 kilos. This is the weight of a child at birth. Can you imagine this? His condition is very, very tragic. He suffers from acute malnutrition. His skin is stretching tightly over his bones.
أشهر ويزن 3 كيلو. تمام.
Ahmed, before the civil war, there were issues with healthcare in Yemen. Can you explain to me what the healthcare system is like right now?
Yes, and actually, yeah. Hi, I'm back. I'm sorry for the bad connection, but we need to send the story from here to tell people, an audience is suffering from this.
All right, so we've lost Ahmed again. Ahmed, we're not hearing you very clearly. I'm so sorry about that. I'm just going to pick up, and we'll come back to you if we're able to. So there were so many stories, Afrah. I want to share one here with you, and this is from Hannah, who sent us some tweets, and Hannah here talks about how long it takes to get fuel, and the women come with their children. There are no nearby public facilities like restrooms. You can't get out of line because your spot will be taken. And the amount of people who beg is crazy. She's giving us just a little look into what is it like to be in Yemen during wartime. Hannah goes on to say most of the women are breadwinners and have no report to work on a daily basis. And the fare of public transport is expensive. It's getting higher. And that's because of COVID-19. The small businesses are going out of business. And we go on. Again, such a vivid story that she's telling here. She says the many rumors say that this fuel crisis will be longer than expected. The humanitarian situation in Yemen is beyond the worst now. Afrah.
It's unbelievable. It's hell on earth for many inside Yemen. As I speak to you now, I've lost count of how many relatives and friends and relatives of friends, and like seeing children like who look like skeleton, while all those warring parties don't care. Women are suffering the most because their loved ones, the men, are like in detention centers. They don't know where they are. Women have to to show that they are strong and try to make living with any means. So most of them are begging. It's beyond me how this can continue while the world is still watching and doing nothing. Even the warring parties continue their utter disregard for the human cost in Yemen. The human cost that is, we cannot even quantify. Excuse me for getting emotional, but my phone is full of voice messages from women and men inside Yemen pleading for the world to do something and end this unnecessary suffering. Yeah.
A lot of people on YouTube, thank you for watching. Thank you for staying with us. We really appreciate it. Want to know what can they do to help? That was one question. The other question from YouTube is the UN helping? What is the UN doing? Afrah.
So international organizations, including Human Rights Watch, we are in close contact with partners from the international civil society organizations and everyone is trying tirelessly to continue their work with the limited funding that they have. So as we know, there is a significant decline in the humanitarian aid going to Yemen in comparison to other years. But I think there is also the problem of war profiteering and the economy of war, where a lot of international donors are indirectly, I would say, objecting to how the different warring parties are using the international aid or misusing the humanitarian situation to have some, commercial gain. But I think what is alarming and concerning that millions of civilians are in this intolerable situation between the war economy and the world and the international donors wanting to punish the warring parties. So it's Ahmed is back, I think. So it's very important to make sure that the civilians in Yemen continue to have the right help that they need, but we cannot really continue with allowing the war economy.
So Ahmed is in Sana'a in Yemen. We don't have the best connection. It's a civil war right now. It's a really difficult time in Yemen. So I know that you will bear with us as we go back to him. Ahmed, first of all, I want to play Xavier though. Xavier is from Save the Children. Xavier is his a very simple answer for how we get out of this situation. Afrah already says this is hell on earth. How do you get out of hell on earth? This is Xavier from Save the Children.
The only solution to the crisis for the short term are a ceasefire, more funding, more access, meaning that all involved can work on battling the coronavirus and other humanitarian needs. And of course, in the long term, the only answer to the terrible situation in Yemen is a political one. I mean, a sustainable agreement that will lead to peace for the Yemeni children.
Ahmed, it's good to have you back. Good to have your connection back as well.
Yes.
I am thinking the question we asked at the beginning of this show was, has the world abandoned Yemen? How would you answer that question?
Well, unfortunately, I can say, the world, there are free men and women all around the world. Is that you help us to stop this war. This war, there is no solution. As you saw, the UN conference that they made for Yemen, together money was failed because, the world are busy also with their lives as well. But in Yemen, it's a catastrophe. It's the worst humanitarian, the worst humanitarian war in the world. It's a human made. For 5 years of war in Yemen has greatly limited the capacity of communities and the government to prepare for and respond to this global COVID-19 pandemic. Not to mention that Yemeni basic infrastructure, as we said before, was already very weak because of the beginning of the conflict and the humanitarian crisis 5 years ago.
Let me show you something, audience, because I know you've been asking, we want to do something. Let me give you some positive news, potentially positive news. So this is a donors conference, donors pledge, and this was earlier on this month. Donors pledge 1.35 billion in humanitarian aid to war-ravaged Yemen. And remember, this is in the middle of our global pandemic, so these pledges were made. I'm just going to put a counterpoint here, though, because there is some reality to how much is pledged and how much actually turns up. Muad says the world can't do anything about Yemen because rich nations only hold conferences as PR stunts showing that they care, but in reality they will not even give money that they pledge. The uneducated world citizens follow the same silly narrative every time without question. Ahmed, that is very, very cynical. Do you think the money will turn up in Yemen?
Well, the problem, as I said to you, if you saw, UN requested like $2 billion and $45 million, and in the end, they made 135. So it's not enough. It's half the budget actually. Don't forget that you have so many programs in UN. It's not only food, it's also wash, and there are another programs related to clean water, and we may have a new wave of cholera. And as we said in Yemen, we don't have only COVID-19. People thinks like, okay, COVID-19 in Yemen, but so what's what's going on? It's like we have another diseases such as cholera, also dengue fever, and malaria. So it's collapsing, and we need to stop this war immediately. It's not like there is no way to finish this war because people are dying every day. People are suffering. When we go to the ground with journalists, we meet families everywhere in the country, and they really suffer, and no one needs this war to continue. So the best idea is like they stop this war, and we have to build our new bright future.
Jared Wilhelm 2002 is on YouTube right now. Thank you, Jared, for actually watching. We really appreciate you and everybody who is asking, where do we donate? Where do we give money to? I learned something from a colleague of mine. You will know his reporting on Al Jazeera. And he says it is not for us as journalists to tell you where to donate. Choose a charity and organization that you personally trust. Choose one that is looking after people in Yemen, the children in Yemen, the health system in Yemen, and then donate to them. And that was great advice that applies to every single humanitarian crisis that we will cover on Al Jazeera in the world that you encounter. So thank you for your care, your empathy, YouTube audience. That is what you need to do. Afrah, thank you so much for being with us. You've been our rock, because it's been tricky keeping in touch with Ahmed, but Ahmed is in Sana'a in Yemen, and we appreciate you bringing your stories, your reporting to us, even in difficult situations. Thanks everybody for staying with us and watching this episode of the stream. And of course, Yemen remains maybe not in the headlines, but the situation remains down on the ground. Don't lose sight of that. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.